Okay, so, and this is now, for me, the big one. Okay, so Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now, I have stuff to say about this, okay? So if you remember, and if you're a regular listener, this is well rehearsed, okay? Star Wars Episode 1, you and I were at Radio 1. We did a great big competition to take the biggest Star Wars fan out to Los Angeles to see Star Wars.
What a prize this was.
Phantom. What a prize it was. It was an amazing prize. We flew them out there. We put them in a hotel. We drove them to the premiere in a big glitzy stretch limousine. They were massive Star Wars fans. In order to get to the point of being there, they'd had to answer all these questions. We got there. We watched Phantom Menace. And they came out and we said, well, what do you think? They went, it's okay. Which was just like, that was, for me, that was the review of that film. Episode 2, the Attack of the Clones, I remember really clearly interviewing Ewan McGregor about his career around about the point that he was doing Obi-Wan Kenobi, which he returned to recently. And he literally said, yes, and then there's Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. He couldn't even say the title without losing the will to live, because everyone thought it was a terrible. And I think that Attack of the Clones may be the worst of all of them. And then you got to 3. Now, 3 always had the most going for it, because 3, Revenge of the Sith, a title which incidentally echoes the mistitling of Revenge of the Jedi. You will remember that before Return of the Jedi was called Return of the Jedi, it was announced as Revenge of the Jedi, and there are rare collectible posters with that title on it, and indeed rare collectible T-shirts. But Revenge of the Sith is the point in the story when everything that's been leading us up to this point, it's Anakin going to the dark side and becoming Vader. Here is some of the trailer that lays out what's happening.
You will not take it from me!
Your anger and your lust for power have already done that. You have allowed this Dark Lord to twist your mind until now you have become the very thing you swore to destroy.
Don't lecture me, Obi-Wan. I see through the lies of the Jedi. I do not fear the dark side as you do.
Is that the whole movie?
Well, look. So here's the thing,
and very silly voices.
There are, however, now. So firstly, cards on the table. When the film came out, I didn't like it at all, and I was very dismissive of it, as indeed were many other critics. One of the key things was the general feeling that Hayden Christensen was just terrible. Peter Bradshaw, in his review in The Guardian, famously called him that Jedi master of woodenness, the flatliner to end all flatliners. Another critic, and I've said this before, said in the headline of their review, "To the beginning we have come, wasted our time we have."
Very good.
And the general feeling was that this should have been the thing that everything was leading up to, and it should have been the most interesting thing. And we were all very, very sniffy about it. Whilst accepting that, on the plus side, Ian McDiarmid's Palpatine gives it some welly as the source of evil, and the cast also includes Natalie Portman, Samuel Jackson, Jimmy Smits, Keisha Castle-Hughes, Christopher Lee. But a lot of the attention was the dialogue is very badly written. The way that George Lucas directs it is flat as a pancake, and Hayden Christensen is terrible. However, I know that when the film came out, Child 2 was profoundly affected by it and found it stressful, particularly the Anakin has killed younglings thing. And so anyway, I had a conversation with Child 2, no longer a child, now a grown and very intelligent person, not that he wasn't intelligent when he was young. I said, look, just tell me this. What's the general opinion now of Revenge of the Sith? And we had a really, really good conversation about it. He said, well, the first thing is you have to remember that our generation grew up with your generation telling us that the original Star Wars were the best Star Wars, and we weren't really allowed to like the prequels. And he said, and now we're the generation that grew up with the prequels. They are our Star Wars movies. And some of us think, we were told for ages, Empire Strikes Back is a masterpiece. Well, actually, these are the films that we grew up with. And for us, Revenge of the Sith is a film that, for all the things that are wrong with it, and then he says, and there are a million things wrong with it, it has a place. The one thing that we've absolutely agreed on is the John Williams score is brilliant, and I think it is arguable. I mean, Child 2 said this, and I think this is, funny enough, I was writing about this in a book I was writing recently. It is arguable that it is the best of the scores. I mean, it is an amazingly well done score. The second thing is, I accept that I was always the wrong age. I mean, I remember saying, when the first Star Wars came out, I was of that sort of cynical age in which I was like, it's not Solaris, it's not, it's not Soylent Green, it's not Silent Running. And then it wasn't really until The Force Awakens that I kind of understood the movies and I got them. But what Child 2 said was that for them, it was and he started talking about the story, and he started talking about it's the whole thing about that Anakin's corruption happens because Anakin is terrified of losing the person that he loves. And the reason that he's attracted to and I've forgotten all of this, I'll be honest with you. The reason he's attracted to the dark side is because because he has this story in his head that will enable him to overcome death, not for him, but to save the person he loves. And in doing that, he sort of sets in motion all these things which bring about his own downfall. And so people talk about Greek tragedy and blah, 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 blah. And yes, there are things that are wrong. But what was amazing was, like, when I was listening to that, knew all the lines from that completely off by heart. And then I was fiddling around on the internet, and there was a thing about a lot of people, people started using those lines as memes. And I said, is that true? He said, well, yes, there were memes, but some of them were sort of mocking memes because of the way it was done. But it is definitely a film which, for the people, because one of the things with the prequels that Lucas did was he aimed it at a younger audience who he thought would then grow up with them. And that's why Phantom Menace is basically aimed at a sort of, an under 10 audience almost. By the time that generation gets to Revenge of the Sith, that film has a place in their hearts. Now, I don't think I'm ever going to fully understand it, because I think that my reactions to about the fact I don't think George Lucas is a great director. I think he's a poor script writer, although he's a good plotter. And I do think that the performances are bad. I think Hayden Christensen is I'm never going to think he's good in it. But I also think, in retrospect, all these years later, that there was an element, not just an element, I think that there was a snobbery involved in it. And I was really cut to the quick when Child 2 said, we grew up with your generation telling us what was wrong with this. And your generation telling us, the original Star Wars, blah, 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 blah. And he said, for our generation, Revenge of the Sith is what you all say about The Empire Strikes Back. No one thinks The Empire Strikes Back is perfect. There are loads of things wrong with it. And I said, well, do you think you'll go and see it in the cinema? He said, what, it's back in cinemas? And I went, yes. And he went, yes, I will go and see it in the cinema. And a bunch of friends of mine who can recite the whole film off by heart will go and see it in the cinema. And we know what's wrong with it. And we know there are things about it that are creaky and bad. And we know all those things. We know all those things. And then he did a very good impression of Ewan McGregor being particularly terrible in one scene. And he said, we know all those things and it doesn't matter. For us, it is a part of our history, and I felt kind of genuinely humbled, thinking, yeah, you're absolutely right. Old farts like me telling you that you can't like this. And the other thing I didn't realize at the time was apparently in America, some right-wing American critics hated the film because they accused it of having a liberal bias and saying that it was Bush. It was a commentary on the Bush administration and the Iraq War. And then Lucas said, well, actually, the storyline was the Vietnam War, but then pointed out to the parallels between those two conflicts. Anyway, I would like to say, after all these years, after all these decades, that on the eve of its re-release in cinemas, yeah, I was a tired old man telling young people that the Star Wars that I loved, which incidentally I didn't love, was better.